joining us tonight. Tonight we have Tim Ritter, and a local author, storyteller, speaker, and genealogist here to present the program Music and Mayhem. So thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thank you for having me. Ready for me to share my screen?
Yep.
All right. Make sure I pick the right one. That would be very helpful. All right. Well, the whole point of tonight's discussion is the kind of the musical history of Springfield that's pretty much forgotten. Everybody remembers the Ozark Jubilee. You know, that's one of the things that's kind of a benchmark for everybody is the Ozark Jubilee, which of course ran from January 22nd of 1955 through September 24th of 1960 from the Jewel Theater in downtown Springfield. There were two names, Ralph Foster and Cy Simon were the men that kind of ramrodded the whole thing. And it really was a phenomenon because it was the only televised program that was devoted to country music. You know, there were all kinds of radio programs. You know, there were a lot of different radio stations that broadcast live. Certainly the Grand Ole Opry was something that everybody listened to live over the radio. But this was a stop on the nationally touring circuit, and this was a televised program. So, you know, it was really a big deal. And that's what everybody thinks of when they think of Springfield's country music history. But there were things that happened after the end of the Ozark Jubilee that have pretty much been forgotten about. And it just so happens that my family, specifically my parents, figure very closely into all of that stuff that took place. During the time that the Ozark Jubilee was going on, there just happened to be down in Douglas County a couple of twins by the name of Delbert and Delmas Ritter that began singing at an early age. And eventually these two farm boys decided to teach themselves how to play guitar and sing. And it ended up that Delbert, who is on the left, he taught himself guitar and he was the lead singer. And then Delmas on the right learned mandolin and would sing a high harmony. And so they started to sing around the area. And of course, anytime they were at home, you know, they were singing in the living room, but they caught the attention of a guy by the name of Lloyd Evans, who was a disc jockey in Springfield and had his own show called Country Caravan. And the Country Caravan was this traveling road show. And usually what it was a big old flatbed pickup that they would park in some town square. And they would have all the musicians and instruments up on the back of the flatbed. And they would do a show for whoever from the public would show up. Now, right there, that's Lloyd Evans. That's the guy that ran the whole thing. He was a disc jockey on KGBX. And then there were a few other interesting people that were part of this show. The house band that consisted of, you know, the main band that he used for the Country Caravan included not only those two twins standing back there in the background, but also you had this guy who eventually became very well known in Branson. This is none other than Lloyd Presley, who was the patriarch of the Presley family. He had a little group that was called the Ozark Playboys, and they were a little quartet of musicians, and he kind of headed it up, and they were the main musicians on this Country Caravan. So anyway, what happened with the twins was they ended up leaving Douglas County, Ava area, and they went to Springfield to live with Lloyd and his wife, Reve. They were still in high school. And so he enrolled them in Parkview, which was a brand new high school in Springfield at that time. And they lived with him. And what they would do is they would go to KGBX studios and they would play live. They would play recorded stuff and all of that. Now, these two twins also ended up having a couple of girlfriends, Mary on the left and Dorothy on the right. And they would be in the audience and they would start making all kinds of racket and yelling and make it sound like there was this live audience in the studio. And so that's how they did that for a while, because again, there were a lot of radio stations that were broadcasting whatever music anybody would, care to listen to. So anyway, all of that was developing. And when the Ozark Jubilee had ended, Lloyd thought, I've got to get something going in Springfield that will bring these touring musicians, these nationally touring artists, bring them back to Springfield and make Springfield a destination once again. And it just so happened that there was the perfect venue just outside of Springfield, and he was able to put together one of the most unique shows for all of those touring artists, and it was called Farmerrama, and it came from Fantastic Caverns. Now, if you take the tour of Fantastic Caverns today, you can actually see the remnants of the stage that was used for the show. It was in this large area that had a relatively flat room to it. They could fit hundreds of people into the room. So it was perfect for putting on a show. And they had a big rock in the back of it. And that was the backdrop. And behind that, that's where everybody changed clothes, changed into whatever outfit they were going to wear that night. And they also even had a concession stand. And what they would do is they would record the show on Friday night, Saturday night, and then play it over the radio, the recording of it over the radio on Sunday. And so that's how you not only had the live version of it, but then it was also broadcast on KGBX. And as you can see, they're bragging there on the front cover that they had 5,000 watts of power to be able to broadcast to whoever would be able to listen to it. That image there of the Farmarama sign there, that is actually from one of the last remaining souvenir books that exist from that show. And this is one of the photographs of the entire house group that was part of the show at that time. This is taken directly from that old book. And you see in the middle holding the banjo, that's Lloyd Presley. And then there's a broad group of people that appeared on the stage, all over to the far right. That's my father, that's Delmas in the striped sweater. And then next to him, that's Mary. And so they were part of not only the show itself, but even the advertising media. Now, another part of that show, certainly you're going to recognize one of these faces. There on the left, that is none other than Gary Presley, who is the character of Herkimer to this day, down at the Presley show in Branson. He was just about 16 years old, maybe 18, whenever all of this was going on at Fantastic Caverns. He developed the Herkimer character and came up with all of the comedic jokes, that they did. Now, the guy that's on the right, his name was Fred McCurdy, and he was actually a singer. He played guitar and sang, but he developed the character of the caveman. And of course, the caveman's main goal throughout the night was to disrupt the show and to irritate Herkimer. And so, they kind of likened it to Abbott and Costello because they were just so completely silly. And so anyway, those two became the local comedians that were part of the show as well. And this went on for several years. Now, again, as part of the advertising, as part of the book that I showed you, Mom and Dad were part of that. And by that time, they were starting to have kids. And so they referred to them as the home folks. And that's my sister Debbie down there, the little girl in front. The idea was she was going to be waving at bats. That's my brother Doug there to the left. Highland Dairy was one of the sponsors of the show. And so they gave Doug these empty milk jugs, and he decided to pull it up to his face like he's drinking, just as they snapped the picture and they said, Doug, as you can see, has a drinking habit. And then it just so happens the little guy in Mom's arm just happens to be me. Now, one exciting thing about all of this is one time when I was down at the Presley show, as part of their introduction, they show a lot of the history of the Presley family performing and all of that. And at one point, there's video footage of Gary Presley jumping around on the stage. and I just about had a fit. I thought, oh my gosh, I never even considered the idea that there might be video footage of that show. And so I asked them about it, and they said, oh yeah, absolutely. There's about 45 minutes in existence. It's not all the show, but there is video footage in existence. And so because of that fact, I wanted to share with you just a few seconds of the show and kind of narrate what's going on there. But this was actually shot in the 1960s, early 1960s, on the stage. And at the very end, there's about 5 to 7 seconds of my parents on this video. But I'll start this rolling. There's no sound to it, of course, but there they are playing. You can see Lloyd Evans on the back in the background there on the banjo. And that's Lloyd Evans that's doing the talking there. And you see the KGBX thing in front of the, oh, there's the caveman. Here he is. He's coming down, and there again, playing more music. He would kind of start yelling while they were in the middle of a song. And here he comes. And, you know, it's almost scary what he's wearing there. But anyway, so he's talking, and there he is messing with Gary Presley as Herkimer. And they're fooling around, and now they're going to play some music together. And back then, Gary was a fantastic guitar player, and most certainly still is. There's the crowd, and they would have a good-sized crowd. There's Gary again playing guitar. He's a fantastic guitar player. And now, all of a sudden, there is Mom and Dad, those few seconds of them playing. And that's it. That is the extent of them, certainly. The video does continue on, and one of the things that I find fascinating is toward the very end of the 45 minutes that exist, there is an old country singer by the name of Bobby Bear that you may remember, and he has a variety of musicians in his band. And there's this one guy in the background that's playing guitar. And a little bit later on, they show this guitar player standing there playing, and he's picking without a pick. He's bare fingering it. And if you look at him real closely, I swear it's Willie Nelson. I don't know if it really was or not, but of course, Willie was living in this area at the time. There is a very strong possibility it was actually Willie Nelson that was performing that night. Now, I have to tell you this story, and I call this story, and then there was that night, because this is one of those tales that's kind of notorious in the whole saga of that show that went on. And this took place one evening in late 1964 when Mom was extremely pregnant with me. She and Dad were barely 25 years old at that time, and of course they're appearing every weekend on the show. And they would try to pick new songs each time, you know, that they would appear. And so this particular time, you know, they have their opportunity come up. So Lloyd Evans introduces them in his normal way. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bring the home folks, Stelmus and Mary Ritter. Let's give them a round of applause. And of course, greeted with loud applause, Dad steps up on the stage, the microphone, wearing his flat top haircut and all that kind of stuff. And Mom steps up after him wearing a, you know, pretty red dress. Dad says, "Thank you all," as he, you know, kind of squints into the lights, that type of thing. He always did that type of thing. It's great to see everyone tonight. He always said that. We're happy to have all the radio listeners. And so he asks Mom, "What are we going to sing tonight?" And she says, "Love is no excuse." And so they say, "Okay, boys, let's go." Well, "Love is no excuse" was a song that was written by Justin Tubb, released as a duet by his father, Ernest Tubb, with Loretta Lynn. And that was several years prior to this. But then in February of '64, Jim Reeves, who was kind of a crooner at that time, he recorded the song with Dottie West. And it was receiving a lot of airplay, especially at this time, the time that they were doing that particular show. Well, the opening lyrics to the song are, "Love is no excuse for what we're doing," which immediately drew a snicker from a couple of audience members. And then a few lines later, several people are starting to laugh, and Mom and Dad start to look at each other, wondering why this love song deserves so much laughter. But by the time they got to the end of the second verse and they sang, "Our love can never see the light of day," the audience was really laughing, and they started to figure out that maybe that song was not the best one to pick, considering the fact that Mom was extremely pregnant. The next lines of the song were, "It's been going on for much too long now, and our wrongs have mounted one by one." And at that point, the audience lost it. They all broke into just this howling laughter. And both Mom and Dad started laughing. And there was still another verse to go. And so they tried to get out a couple of words, but it was just no use whatsoever. Mom's face was as red as her dress. She was laughing so hard and a bit embarrassed. Tears are just rolling down her face. And of course, Dad stopped singing when she did. And of course, he's turning red. Everybody on stage, nobody can play a note. So the whole song just ground to a halt. And everybody started trying to, gain control of themselves so the show could go on. But Dad finally stepped up and said, "I think we'll pick a different song next time. Thank you." And so, as you can imagine, the crowd rose to its feet in thunderous applause and whistles as Mom and Dad, who were still laughing hysterically, left the stage. Well, at that point, how do you get that show back together? And it took quite a while. But finally, Gary Presley, in all of his wisdom, he steps up to the microphone, and Lloyd Evans walks up there too. And they're just standing there staring at each other, laughing hysterically, trying to figure out what to do. And so Gary leans into the microphone and he says, "Do you suppose someone ought to tell them?" And trying to quit laughing, Lloyd says, "Tell them what?" And so Gary says, "That we've all got a pretty good idea of what they've done." And I'm here to tell you, for years, anytime that my mom would happen to meet somebody that knew that she was part of that show, they would bring up that night. Out of all the nights that they performed, they were remembered for that particular night, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. Now, in 1967, that was the year of big change, because the show at the Cave, Farmarama, at that point ground to a halt for whatever reason. The touring was no longer going to come there. There was, some breakup that was taking place. And so essentially the show fizzled and everybody moved on. The Presleys actually moved the show kind of permanently down to Branson starting in 1967. So anyway, so the show at the Cave ended. And interestingly enough, because it's Springfield and because they're trying desperately to keep in the public eye as a source of country music, there was a new show that started. And again, this is one of those shows that nobody actually remembers, but it was called the Four Star Opry. That was broadcast from the Four Star Theater on Commercial Street in downtown Springfield. And the Four Star, that theater had actually had several names before. It was a movie theater at one time, but had been renovated to become just a very basic, just a live music theater. And it was two buildings. The first building you walked into was where the ticket sales were and the refreshments and lobby in general. And then further back was where the artists would change clothes and all that kind of stuff. And then you walked through a couple more doors, and that's when you walked into the theater itself. And there is one recording that I know of that show. And I'm sorry, but it's some of the worst music you'll ever hear. It was their first show, and it sounded like they'd rehearsed for about 5 minutes. So anyway, it was pretty rough. But what they were doing, they were actually recording live on radio, actually FM radio, which was interesting because most of the time, most of this programming was on AM radio. That seemed to have the biggest reach, but they were trying with FM radio at this particular show. Now, interestingly enough, for Delmas and Mary, they are trying to continue on, And it's not just two kids now that are part of the family, but now there's three. And so they decided that, there were other family shows that were going on. And so they decided, let's try to make this a family act. There were a lot of times that mom and dad appeared on stage. And this is from the Four Star Opry. It's one of the few photographs that exist from the Four Star Opry. And that's mom in the yellow dress. They're standing next to dad. This was taken in 1969 when she was pregnant with my younger sister. And so anyway, that's part of what was going on, was just them playing together. But they decided, since it's going to be a family thing, that, why not drag our kids up on stage? And so that's what they did. That's my sister Debbie in the dress. And then my brother Doug and I, we wore brown jeans and these red and white checkered shirts with red and white checkered handkerchiefs hanging out the back. And I've got my back to you. I'm hanging onto the mic stand, and then that's my brother standing next to me. And so anyway, they would sing their songs, and then they would have us kids sing songs with them. And there were several different songs that we sang with them. There was an old Johnny Cash and June Carter song that was called Jackson. And we would sing along with them on that. And then a lot of times they would have, like my sister, sing a song on her own. There was a Coke commercial at the time that had a song that said, "I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." And there was actually a full song with that. It wasn't just a Coke commercial. And so oftentimes Debbie would sing that song. But then they decided they would make the brilliant move and let me and my brother sing the song as well. Now, in 1969, I am not quite 5 years old, which means my brother was, 1969, Doug would have been 7 years old. You have a 4-year-old and you have a 7-year-old that are going to sing into the microphone. And what song are we going to pick? Well, it just so happens to be a song from Hee Haw. And I'm afraid you probably know where I'm going with this. It was that crazy old song that they like to do, that "Where, oh, where are you tonight?" And if you remember, at the end of that song, there's that "you met another and you were gone," right? Okay. Well, guess who had the job of spitting at that particular point in the song? Yeah. They let a 4-year-old spit into the microphone to do that part of the song. And let me just drive this thought home. A 4-year-old is spitting at the end of the song. Apparently, I should have been electrocuted because I absolutely drowned the microphone. But anyway, so that was part of that show. Now, the show, it was produced by a local politician. And they kept going for a couple of years, but eventually the crowd started to dwindle, and they just could not keep the show going. And so I want to say it was around 1970 that the Four Star Opry finally folded. Now, the building where it was, the part that was once the lobby and the concession stand and the ticket booth and all that still stands. This is a photograph from one evening on Commercial Street. That building is still standing, and actually an artist lives there now and has her studio at the front. Where the theater portion was, that burned down in the early 1970s. So that part of the building is no longer with us. But this part is most certainly still standing. And where the theater was, by the way, is now a parking lot just to the west of that footbridge there on Commercial Street that they continue to try to save and renovate. So anyway, so that show dried up. That was the end of the family music shows in Springfield at that time. Now, interestingly enough, there were other family type music shows that were going on in the area. You had, for a time, you had Dave Drennan, who was a local musician, had a show going on at the Crossroads Auditorium in Nixa. And then you also had, there was a bunch, the Crossland family. They had their own family show that was going on down in the lakes area. And so Dad started looking for other family shows. And he heard about a new show after Dave Drennan left the Crossroads Auditorium. There was another show that was developed very quickly that was called the New Ozark Jubilee. And the thought was that they would capitalize on the old Ozark Jubilee, you know, the fame of that. And they would start this new show that was kind of a restart of it in hopes that they could get enough of an audience to have it on radio. And then ultimately, wouldn't it be great to have it compete with the Grand Ole Opry and be on television? So that was, in general, the plan for the New Ozark Jubilee. Now, interestingly enough, there are no photographs of that show that I'm aware of. I have never seen one photograph that was taken during the time of the New Ozark Jubilee. Since we're talking about Christian County here, this was down in Nixa, and show you where that was. It's actually a boat store now, but the theater that was known as Crossroads Auditorium was just south of the intersection of 14 and 160. You go down there a little bit, you probably know exactly where it is. The next stoplight after that intersection of 14 and 160, that is this little side road. And if you look immediately to your right, that boat business is where Crossroads Auditorium originally was. Now, I got brave and decided to go down there just to see what the building looked like, and they did let me in and take a look around and take some photographs. This was once upon a time the auditorium there, and I'm standing at the back of it, and the floor, of course, as you would expect, would have sloped, and there were, you know, a multitude of rows of seats that were in the building going down toward the front. And of course, the windows that you see to the left, those of course did not exist at that time. Right here where this little showroom kind of area and the parts and service, that is the old stage. I was very surprised to see that they had utilized that part of the structure as part of their showroom. They didn't just tear it out. That is the original stage. Off to the left, there was a place where, you know, musicians could stay off to the side waiting for their turn to go on or whatever. There was, you know, side areas on both sides of it with little steps that would lead you up. And then at the front, this is where the entrance was, where you bought your tickets and then went inside. And then this area over here was once the concession stand. And as you can tell, that's now offices. But it was certainly an interesting show. At one time, they had the MC for the show was Fred Lynn, who was a radio personality and also a local politician. And as he got more into the politics and got into state politics, he quit being the MC of the show. And so they started having some of the disc jockeys from KTTS actually started being the MC for the show. And so that continued on for quite some time. And it was a weekly program. And they absolutely filled this auditorium every week. It was a very, very popular show. And they would rotate these bands through. You do one or two sets a night. And it was a very, very popular show. There's one recording of it that exists that I know of. Now, around 1977, the show came under the ownership of a local businessman, Tommy Thompson. And he made a few changes. And one of the things that ultimately ended up happening, and I don't really know the circumstances, you know, I was just about 12 years old when all of this went down. But for whatever reason, the show stopped being at Crossroads Auditorium. And what they did was they moved it to Springfield to the Landers Theater. It was about 1977. And so you can just imagine what it would be like to be up on stage, you know, in front of this beautiful theater. Now, the problem was, unfortunately, there weren't a lot of people that were coming to the show at that point. I think by that time it had kind of gone its way. I believe they moved it probably to Springfield just because they thought perhaps they would get bigger audiences, and people would not be trying to drive all the way down to Nixa, which of course that's not that big of a drive anymore to any of us. But back then, I guess it seemed like more of a drive. But anyway, so they had it going on in the Landers Theater for a very short amount of time. They couldn't fill up more than 5 or 6 rows of the Landers Theater, and so it was unfortunate that the show, didn't put enough variety in it to keep people coming. I know Dad certainly tried to put a bunch of comedy or a little tidbits of humor into his portion of the show, and I ended up playing a part in that. But for the most part, it was just pretty dry because of the fact that it was just the same old folks time and time again. But I will tell you, the last time we tried to do anything silly, there was a guest lady that was going to sing this song called Crying Time. And it's one of those slow, sad songs. It's crying time again. You're going to leave me, and, words like that. And so the idea was I took a rag and I soaked it in water. And at the right point, I was going to step out on stage, walk across, acting like I'm crying, and then wring it out when it's full of water and make it just, pour all this water out on the stage. Now, what nobody was thinking about was the fact that when I walk out on stage and I wring this thing out, there are wires everywhere. And, you've got wires for guitars, you've got wires for microphones, you've got wires for amplifiers. And so I get to a spot in the middle of the stage and I start wringing this thing out. And Jim McCurdy, who had been the caveman for the show out at the cave, he was there that particular night on stage singing as well. And he starts yelling, "Hey, hey, hey, we've got cords out here." He wasn't in on the fact that that was going to happen. And so he panicked. But anyway, everybody made it through it, and no lights went out or anything. But I spent most of my time looking from that side of the stage. Anyway, as I say, it kind of dried up. And unfortunately, it was really one of the last family-oriented shows to take place, and ultimately ended the idea of my family being involved in any kind of a local show that the public would go to. So that all basically came to a screeching halt. Now, what ultimately became of the 4 kids that were involved in this interesting little journey toward hopefully stardom, but certainly just interesting time making music together. Kathy, who was the youngest, she kind of got in on the last of it. She was around for the new Ozark Jubilee, but she had missed out on Farmarama and the Four Star Opry. She went on. She's got a wonderful husband and 2 kids, and they will certainly live in the area. Debbie also went on. She actually went on musically in high school, junior high school, and was a fantastic singer as well as musician. But that really wasn't her dream in life, and so she went on to have a great career and 2 great daughters and a husband. And then my brother Doug was the one that decided to actually keep showmanship in his blood. He actually became a drummer, and in his, I guess it was in his 40s, he got involved in a blues band, Steve Smith and the Sneakers, local band, and they actually recorded a couple of CDs. You can find them on iTunes, and you can find their CDs on Amazon, that type of thing. So Doug really, carried the torch. He continued on with the musicianship in the family, and really wound up being the only one that did. Unfortunately, we did lose Doug just last year. He died of a heart attack at the age of 58 last year. So we no longer have him making music in the family. And then, of course, I went on to have a great bunch of kids and a lovely wife as well. Now, Mom and Dad, there was one terrible night at some point where Dad made the announcement that he was going to start playing in bars. He was going to develop a band that would play in bars, and that was how he was going to move forward with playing music. Of course, I didn't understand it back then. I understand now the fact that, as an artist, he needed to continue to play music. But it's a shame that there wasn't any other venue that was available. He did kind of go checking around. I'd mentioned the Crosslands. He was, going to their show from time to time to see if he could fit in. And of course, that didn't work out. But anyway, what he did was he developed his own band for bars, and they would have practices at the house as I was growing up. There was always, about every month, there was a night where everything got cleared out of the back family room, and a bunch of instruments moved in, and the entire neighborhood got to listen to Dad's practice. As he continued to play in the bars, Mom would go with him, and pretty much was with him throughout the entire thing. Partially because of the fact that he would have her come up and sing as well, but also just the fact that she knew she needed to kind of stay close by, because who knows who would like to come and get his attention, and she was right. It was definitely a necessary thing. Now, I had mentioned that Dad and his twin had sang together when they were much younger, and they ended up kind of going their separate ways. And nobody really totally knows what caused that split in general way back in the 1960s. But I am happy to report that as they got older, the twins got back together and started making music together. There were several times that they sat around together and played their guitars and sang the old songs that they used to sing. They also started celebrating their birthdays together. And then in the early 2000s, Delbert developed cancer. And this last photograph I popped up there, that was just before Delbert died. And they got together one more time to sing those old songs. And they knew deep down inside this was going to be the last time. But they did enjoy it. It was kind of a family gathering. And it was most certainly something special to get to witness the twin brothers getting to sing together one last time, because it most certainly was very important to them. My mother, the time kind of took a toll on her, and not only chasing down Dad as he played in the bars an awful lot, but also her health suffered quite a bit as she continued on through life. She had a miscarriage between me and my younger sister being born, and several other health problems that developed. A lot of surgery. She was in and out of the hospital several times over the course of a few years. And we lost her in 1994, just after Christmas, at the age of 55. That last picture there, that's the last photograph that was taken of her at a family Christmas gathering in 1994. So unfortunately, she was not able to hang in there. We still don't really know exactly what happened to her, but the best guess is either a heart attack or a massive stroke. Now, I was fortunate enough to be able to record Mom's lovely voice a few times on audio, but most certainly on video as well. And so I wanted to end this evening just to let you hear that voice, because obviously in all of those earlier programs that she did, she was most certainly a very young lady, and her voice was still kind of finding its way. But here in '92, this is just a little over 2 years before she died, she was singing a song that her mother had taught her. And so I thought this would be an appropriate way to end out this program. Here we go, just a couple minutes.
To God alone, just us to call our own. The Out there beneath the kindly sky, a sweet little mist somewhere in the west, and let the rest of the world go by.
Now I should mention that was done. It was a performance for a dinner at the local Teamsters Hall. And there's one little part in there. I don't know if you caught it or not, but in the middle of the instrumental part, Mom leans over to tell Dad that he needs to introduce Kenny Keys, who was doing the fiddle solo. And so you see her kind of lean over to tell Dad something, and then she's telling him that. Then she goes back, and then all of a sudden she lurches forward and smacks him on the shoulder. That's because he didn't introduce him soon enough. So anyway, that's classic Mom, and that, my friends, is Music and Mayhem. And so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much. If anyone has any questions, they can type it in the chat or they can mute themselves. If not, we'll end it.
All right. I did get one note that said they can't hear the audio.
That
Were you
was
able to
me.
hear?
It was during your mom singing, and we can add that in later for the YouTube. So
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, sorry about that. We should have tried
no,
that.
it's
before.
okay.
All right. Very good.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, everyone, tonight, and thank you so much, Tim, for presenting for us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Taylor. It was great fun. I hope you enjoyed it.